please welcome founder and CEO of Serverless Inc., Austen Collins. Thank you.
Good morning. Look at this. They've got like flashy new logos, and we got the dubstep, and it's becoming a real tech conference now. I don't know if you were at the Brooklyn one, but I don't know. Remember that? We were sitting there in the tiny little stage area, sweating it out, kind of rubbing elbows on these little tiny seats. I don't know. It's come such a long way. And honestly, I got to give it up to the A-Cloud Guru guys because they're fantastic. They've done a great job. I just want to get one more round of applause for them. Those are the nicest guys. I'm Austen Collins. A couple years ago, I was just a Lambda fanboy that no one would listen to. And I was going around the Bay Area trying to convince people that this new type of compute service was going to be the future of computing in the cloud. And I couldn't get anyone to listen to me, so I created an application framework. And this application framework became the Serverless framework. And I think it really helped progress the movement and show people that you could build entire applications on this new type of compute service and unlock the possibility of this new type of compute service. Since then, I founded a company. We're Serverless Inc. We're a team of 10. We're based in San Francisco. We're backed by a lot of Dockers investors, interestingly enough. And yeah, we're cruising along. We make the framework full time now, and we've got some other projects that we're going to introduce later this year. Since I'm kicking off the conference here, I wanted to go back and maybe just chat a bit about the history a bit more of serverless from the perspective of the serverless framework, because we're in a unique vantage point where we could see a lot of interesting activity. And it's nice for me to be able to do this because once you work on a piece of software for so long, you get so caught up in new features and bugs and stuff like that. You lose the purpose, the reason, the original motivation. It kind of takes a back seat. And so I really enjoyed doing this because I got to go back and just think about everything that was motivating me and the original team in the early days. So this is serverless past, present, and future. And part of the exercise of going back and trying to figure out, why we got into this in the first place, I was just asking around the office a couple weeks ago what developers wanted, just to get consensus again. And a lot of usual stuff here. Developers want to create, of course. Developers want to play, and serverless is fantastic for that. Developers want no restrictions, right? This was a big one. They want to build and play without any restrictions. Developers don't want to maintain anything, usually. A lot of us don't. I think a lot of us here, especially. And one other request. I didn't expect this one, but it was almost immediate. So anyway, we can't, serverless architectures can't help with everything, but it can help with a lot, and especially these top four. Now, back in 2014, before PreLambda, it was kind of business as usual. There was a lot of this, and these are kind of timeless problems, but you see them a lot, especially in Silicon Valley. Everywhere you go, you've got kind of broken culture. You have developers who are working overtime, trying to meet a deadline. They're getting burned out. Lots of over-provisioning, resulting in lots of costs, lots of over-engineering, maintenance, which leads to kind of disillusionment. And in addition to that, you have all this complexity. You have categorical complexity now. The tech landscape is just so robust with so many things going on. And it's interesting now being at Serverlessconf, talking about serverless, reading about serverless every single day, because in the early days, honestly, there was nothing that appealed to me more than just getting rid of a lot of this stuff. I don't think any of us, and especially the original community members around our serverless framework, really set out to go make a new category. I think we were hoping that we could use this new technology to destroy as many categories as possible, keep things simple. And then Lambda came. So, late 2014, it clearly caught my attention, caught a lot of people's attention. Some great articles written about it. This was one that motivated me. a lot in the early days. And this too, this was a good quote that I liked, and that's what really resonated with me, and that's kind of set me out on my mission. And I was up late last night, so I was just kind of adding these mood pieces. And then 2015 came around. A lot of people were experimenting with Lambda, right? They liked it. It was not super mature yet. There weren't a lot of features. A lot of things were half implemented. You couldn't do much with it. And also, just trying to build something with Lambda was really complicated. You had to go into the dashboard. You had to do all this stuff through the dashboard. And it was very easy to provision one function, and you feel that sense of excitement, that sense of wonder after you provision that function. But then you want to try and build something sophisticated, and you end up kind of doing this. You realize the average web application is going to result in a lot of Lambda functions. You take a company that does a traditional microservice architecture, like a big company, like Netflix, for example. They have over 1,000 microservices. I think if Netflix was expressed as Lambda functions, you'd have several thousand Lambda functions. And that's a lot. That's a lot of complexity, especially in the early days. So a lot of people were doing that, trying to tame Lambda, and I was trying to do it myself, and ended up creating this. We used to be called JAWS, and then transitioned to the serverless framework. And the point was, serverless is all about helping you move fast, and the framework is there to help you move fast safely. Also, I think a lot of the success of this project in particular is really due to the fact that it's not just about, if you want to use a great serverless tool, it's not just about uploading the code and managing your code for you, but managing all the things that code touches, that your functions touch, infrastructure dependencies. And the serverless framework takes care of all that for you. You could provision functions, and you could wire them up to their event sources, and also provision their infrastructure dependencies, whether they need a DynamoDB table, S3 bucket, all that. So we did this, and the community started to trickle in. Enthusiasm was real and exciting, and it was all over the place. And this was still 2015, and late in 2015, only a few months after the project was out there, we started to get these stories of just big success stories from recognizable brands. So this was one in the early days where they provisioned a simple website. It was more popular than they expected, and everything crashed. And the engineers over the weekend refactored it onto a serverless architecture using the framework, and then wrote about their experience on Reddit, and caught a lot of people's attention. This wasn't expected. But then more high-profile people were coming to the table. David Guetta. This is Parallax, a great agency in London, who did a project for David Guetta on the serverless framework. Anyway, this is only a few months after the project had been live, and soon enough, it was really interesting. The hobbyists came, right? You'd expect them to come. Lambda's dirt cheap. There's no such thing as kind of underutilization with Lambda, right? You could cut up to 100% of cost, and hobbyists like that especially, and it's easy. But the interesting thing is that these high-profile projects were coming right away, and soon, still in 2015. Fortune 500 companies were coming and asking about the framework, and it was bizarre to me because I've just never seen them move this fast on any technology before. And people were saying, these companies were saying, we want to do 200 serverless projects in 2016. I can't name these companies because we don't really have an agreement with them, but they're definitely Fortune 500. And this is the stuff they're saying. They're incredibly aggressive about this. Company, one in particular, they wanted to do over 200 marketing projects. They're like, we want to do all these in a serverless fashion. By the end of 2016. And other stories I was hearing out of them, which was really interesting, is I heard this great story about an executive who was trying to pitch a concept, and he wasn't getting buy-in, so he just used the framework to go build out a prototype and to show his colleagues, and that's how he convinced people. That's amazing when the executives themselves are actually getting their hands on the tools and proving something with them. And the community grew. And it's still growing today. I think we're a fast-growing, if not one of the fastest-growing open source projects out there. We just hit 16,000 stars a couple days ago. Thank you, thank you. It's honestly an incredible thing to build something that people actually like and use and adds value to their lives. I hope every single person in this room gets to do that one day if they haven't already. And serverless is a good way to do that, of course. Yeah, just another. Another mood piece. All right, 2016 came around, so that was all 2015. It happened fast, faster than I expected. So interesting trends in 2016. So these companies that were getting a hold of this technology, there's always a champion, right? And this is how you get kind of open source and software into large organizations these days. There's these fantastic champions out there. And they'll bring the knowledge. They brought the knowledge of Lambda or the serverless framework into their organization, and they start looking around at jobs and asking the question, will it Lambda? And they have some success with this, and everybody takes note, because once they finish that, this engineer is largely done. They can move on to do something else, which is kind of unusual. And leadership gives them more team members, and soon you have 2, 3 people forming the serverless team in the organization. It's a very scrappy group, very progressive, forward-thinking group, and I know that there's a handful of people who in this room right now who are serverless team members at their organization, and they're doing fantastic stuff. These people are putting hundreds of Lambda functions into production. Just 2 to 3 people. Sometimes it's just one person. And anyway, so this is a big trend we see. The other interesting trend is that it's these qualities. These qualities are so addictive and convenient. Microservices. Everything is functions, event-driven. These functions can respond to any event, any lower-level infrastructure event or custom event. Auto-scaling. That's where the serverless nickname kicks in. Pay-per-execution pricing model. When I look at our Gitter channel and our forum and GitHub issues and stuff, this is usually the quality that brings people through the front door, and then they kind of stay for everything once they realize how powerful it is. And then, of course, the ecosystems, right? These functions as a service providers, a lot of them aren't existing in isolation. They're part of some bigger platform or ecosystem with lots of great services, high-value services you could use right from that function. And these qualities they attract all users and use cases. Once you have these qualities, it's so darn convenient that people from all walks of life want to come and use it, and they'll try and put everything they can in a Lambda function. So these are typical use cases we see: web, mobile, IoT applications, backends, of course, form processing, DevOps automation, all the automation stuff I personally love. This is where you see tremendous creativity come out of developers. Security auditing, stream processing, all this stuff. Now, serverless framework use cases, from what we could tell, is right now invocations, function invocations are mostly 75% for data processing, 20% back-end services, and then the rest is kind of general automation, glue code. However, what we also see is that the projects, the amount of functions are a bit different. So we see, from our perspective, we really help people build backends, serverless backends, as fast as possible. So we see most of our audience doing that with this architecture. Next up is automation, just random automation. I expect that that's going to grow a lot, given all the new use cases that Amazon, the other providers, are enabling for functions. And it's exciting because, again, that's my favorite category. And data processing, not so much in our audience. And the stuff that people were doing in 2016 and are still doing, of course. So people are using Lambda and functions as a service to revolutionize auth and standardize auth throughout their organization. A lot of large enterprise organizations have very strange auth implementations. I never would have thought, but they're using Lambda to standardize that. They're putting Lambda functions in between other endpoints, legacy stuff, and new stuff. GraphQL, this is something that we experimented with in 2015. We didn't expect it to catch on, but everybody's talking about this now. If you don't know GraphQL, absolutely check it out. But you're able to put GraphQL in front of all your data sources. Send up a custom request directly to GraphQL, and that custom request can be querying several data sources, and you could actually be requesting a custom data shape for the resulting records of that query. And you can send this up through GraphQL. GraphQL can go query all these things, DynamoDB tables, existing APIs, all that stuff, bring in all the records, and reshape the request to match the custom shape of your request, all through a single endpoint, right? So if you're into lowest total cost of ownership, which is why a lot of us are here, the ability that GraphQL gives you to compress a REST API of 100 endpoints into a single Graph API with 1 or 2 endpoints is pretty phenomenal, especially when you put that in zero administration, pay-per execution compute service. That is awesome efficiency. So what people are doing with GraphQL, we see a lot, is they'll have, it's kind of like a graph gateway pattern. It's one Lambda function that contains GraphQL. This Lambda function sits in front of multiple Lambda functions that each do separate queries. And it's nice because you get separation of concerns that way. It's still kind of a microservice architecture. I was at a hackathon like a little while ago, and I was sitting there with this guy talking about GraphQL and Lambda, and I was saying, yeah, you could take that pattern and you could put GraphQL in front of every single API that ever existed and just offer one API endpoint for everything. And the guy's like, that's a good idea, and he went and made it at the hackathon. And literally, it's like one API endpoint to access any web service out there, all via GraphQL. Pretty awesome. Dynamic image resizing, this is really cool. I used to pay, what was it, Cloudinary. I used to pay them a lot of money to get this feature, to be able to just request any image size I wanted on the fly. Now people are recreating this. I think Trek 10 has a great example of doing this. That's pay-per execution, dirt cheap. It's amazing. Rendering React components, this is getting more popular in Lambda, kind of following some of the stuff that Zeit is doing, but in Lambda functions. WordPress, people are hosting WordPress and Lambda functions. That's crazy and interesting. But given its, popularity, it's, it should have been expected, I guess. Email clients, people are building their own email clients. I like that. That's pretty cool. Someone told me the other day, they said, I don't like to work with email clients, so I just have all my emails going through SES and Lambda and dumping straight into my Slack. So, I don't know. Slack bots, we get a lot of those. Bots in general, Facebook Messenger bots. There's a cool story of someone who made a serverless project that goes out and takes screenshots of other websites for him. Load testing. Nordstrom, the serverless team over there, those guys are serious pioneers. They're doing so much cool stuff. They have a project called Serverless Artillery, which is a whole bunch, which is some Lambda functions that will go interrogate new Lambda functions that you deploy with load tests using artillery.io. Very cool project, and they're doing some great stuff in progressing the event-driven kind of paradigm with Lambda. And I'm so glad to see that Hello Retail won the competition, because that is an amazing project. Rob over at Nordstrom showed it to me, I think it was like a month ago, and I can't wait to see how much it's progressed since then. But it was a completely event-driven workflow for managing store inventory. And what really got me excited was there was a human element in it. And so you'd upload these products. I'm gonna kind of butcher it. So Rob will, he's doing a talk on it later, and he can explain it a lot more clearly. But you could upload these products. Someone gets a notification. They get a text message on their phone. That person could be gone on vacation for 2 weeks or something. They could come back, take a picture of the product on their phone, send the picture back through Twilio, through Lambda, and this event-driven workflow of populating their inventory continues. And I love that, because it's purely event-driven, and there's a human in the process, which is really interesting to me. Anyway, serverless enables creativity. This is what's so exciting. You go to conferences, and if you go to like a Kubernetes conference or container theme conference, a lot of it's about, the talks are all about administration. You go to Serverlessconf or a serverless meetup, and the talks are always about the stuff that we built, right? And that's an important difference that I see. And we have some greater success stories. We had some greater success stories in 2016. Lots of people are cutting costs up to 100%, and realizing great cost savings, more efficiency, having more freedom to do more projects. This is by far my favorite success story. We interviewed the guys behind this, but if you didn't hear about this, this is census fail, and the Australian government decided to do the census online last year, and they said, okay, we're gonna modernize. We're gonna do the census online. We're gonna create this survey website. They contracted a large technology organization who I won't name, but you could Google them, $9 million to build this survey website. And it seems pretty expensive, but there were some data privacy concerns they had to work around, and they wanted to be sure, right? So they contracted this company $9 million. And they went out and they marketed. They said, everybody come home and do the census survey website. Just go, get home from work, log on, fill out the form, you're done, right? Efficient. And unfortunately, that's what everybody did. So they all came home and kind of logged on at the same time and crashed the website, right? It was down for hours and hours and hours, and they weren't able to collect a lot of data. They've still had so many problems collecting a lot of data. They're not sure if the census is meaningful, the data they're able to derive. So anyway, kind of classic story. And anyway, so it's $9 million. That's how much they contracted. I was looking it up last night. I think the total cost ended up being around $30 million to fix the situation, marketing, all that stuff. Meanwhile, a week after this happened, there were 2 university students who were at a hackathon, and they're like, oh, what should we do for this hackathon project? And one of them was saying, hey, I heard about this serverless stuff. We should give it a shot, and maybe we should try and recreate the census website. And that's what they did. So they went and they recreated the census website in 72 hours. They imitated it perfectly. They're able to strip all the HTML, all the CSS and stuff, and of course rigged it up to like 2 Lambda functions or something, right? And then they load tested it at the very end against more than the load of the actual survey website. And of course the thing performed flawlessly. It scaled very, very well. And they got a lot of attention for this. It was in the news all over the place because census fail was trending, and everybody wanted to jump on it. And so these students benefited from the situation. They were in the news, and the reporters were saying, how much did it cost you to do this? They said, $200. And when we interviewed them afterwards, they said, oh, we were being conservative because we were talking about it publicly. It was more like $100. And I was like, okay, phew. Anyway, incredible story. I love this stuff. And I talk a lot about serverless framework and how it has this great developer experience. And I know I'm kind of biased, but these guys had never used Amazon before. And they use a serverless framework to get this up and running with very little pain. I'd say serverless framework, probably about 30% of our users have never used AWS before. So I think we've succeeded at some level there. I think every single time someone has to go to the dashboard to go do something, our team deems it as a failure. And we say, no, we got to go improve the CLI. We don't want anyone going to the dashboard, the Amazon dashboard, to do anything. Anyway, fascinating trend. Engineers will compromise, find workarounds, leverage serverless architectures because at the end of the day, the underlying efficiencies still result in net positive outcomes. It's incredible the things that people will do to make this work, and it's still new technology, right? I mean, we're still very early here. It's going to get better. It's only going to get better. When people are running into issues, I never hear like, oh, this is a deal breaker. Like, I occasionally hear it. It's a deal breaker. We have to fall back on some other technology. With the rate that the cloud providers are shipping features and enabling new use cases and stuff, I don't hear, hey, let's try some other technology. I hear like, how long do we have to wait until this thing is fixed, right? And the answer is usually like a couple months. But it's incredible what people are doing. There are some reports out there that Lambda can actually have trouble scaling as much as I hate to admit it, because I am a fanboy. But at massive levels of concurrency, you could raise your Lambda limits to tens of thousands of requests. But some people who just have a wall of traffic, and if you provision something and that wall just hits you, it's not a gradual curve up. Even if you have your concurrency limit high, apparently Lambda can still have some issues meeting that wall. But people, and these are large enterprise organizations, are actually warming up their Lambda functions with thousands and thousands of requests before they'll go launch something. And it seems a bit crazy, but they just don't want to go back and use anything else. So hopefully this stuff will be fixed. I'm sure it will. Amazon knows everything. So, new vendors, new technologies coming out. It's a super exciting time. Lambda, Azure Functions, which looks great. That team moves really fast. IBM OpenWhisk, really cool option. They approached serverless not just from the compute perspective, but I think as a whole event-driven platform, which is really interesting. Google Cloud Functions, which looks absolutely fantastic. Great design. So many great decisions made there. We have functions as a service implementations on containers now and Kubernetes. There's a handful of projects out there that will give you this fast experience on top of Kubernetes. It's not like serverless as we know it, but it's getting close, and they're trying to get that experience as close as possible. And we have new kind of serverless themed other technologies like databases, FaunaDB, made by some of the people at Twitter and CouchDB. This is a very cool DynamoDB alternative with a great serverless pricing model. It's pay per execution. You don't really have to think about regions. Fantastic technology. So definitely check that out. I love DynamoDB, but I'm excited to see some new people trying to improve upon it. AWS X-Ray, of course, lots of tools to help us, lots of new tools to help us operate and monitor these architectures. Step functions, we hear, I think out of all the reInvent announcements, I think step functions is the one that was definitely most popular in our audience. Greengrass, Lambda at Edge, use cases, possibility, it's all growing, super exciting. Serverless is being operationalized. This is, at the end of 2016, this is a big theme that we started to see. And it's the serverless teams. And now they've done a lot of projects. They put a lot of Lambda functions into production. And now they're kind of settling on their tooling and their best practices and spreading that knowledge throughout their organization. They want templates. They want to try and templatize everything and hand it off to their other colleagues or their consultants. And now with the serverless framework, we tried to make a great abstraction, but what I've learned is a lot of these companies who are doing serverless, our framework isn't even abstract enough. They want something that's even more higher level. They want just a perfect template of like, here's an IoT app, here's a web application. And it's been an interesting learning for us, but it shows the behavior of this culture. It's not infrastructure focused. It's starting from the top down, not the bottom up. It's like they want to focus on the outcome. They want the outcome first, the end result first, and they want to see the least amount of configuration necessary to provision that end result, and then, of course, have that ability to open up, customize it when they need that. But it's interesting. This is a culture of results first. And serverless first. This is another big theme we hear all the time now. Even when people are having issues with Lambda, they've run into something odd. It doesn't matter. You'll sit around, I get to sit around tables with business leadership, engineering leadership a lot, and they all say this now. They say, we want to do as much as we can in a serverless fashion and fall back to other technologies. We absolutely can't make it work in serverless. So that's a promising trend. So we did a survey in 2016. And some people filled it out. I think we got like 180 responses, and it's pretty interesting. Now this is for our audience, so you can kind of see who's using serverless and what they're using it for, what their pain points are. But you can see from here, enterprise, 50% of our audience is enterprise. The rest is a large enterprise. The rest is smaller, medium-sized businesses, and then of course, large amount of technology startups, government, students. Their roles, large amount of back-end developers, infrastructure engineers, of course, front-end developers, product managers, engineering managers, executives. I didn't know we had this in here, but apparently a lot of executives are actually using the framework themselves, which goes along with that story I told earlier. How would you describe their use? A lot of them are using it for their job already. In the early days, I thought this is going to be a project for hobbyists and people who are just working weekend warriors for a long time. But no, quickly embraced, quickly adopted as much as possible So a lot of our audience using them for a job right now, smaller amounts using them for a side project. A lot are still exploring. Here's where our audience is located. A lot of people in North America, Europe, of course, Australia. Now, pain points. This is what people are reporting still. This was like, quarter 3 of 2016. These are the big issues. Monitoring still a big one. There's new tools, so we'll see how this stuff is changing. Debugging, absolutely the biggest. Testing, second biggest there. Startup latency, cold start, it's really interesting. In the early days, there was so much kind of FUD about the cold start issue. Nowadays, we don't hear that. I think what we have noticed is that the Lambda team in particular is making great progress on this, so it's not that big of an issue. It's not as big as it used to be. Cost, it's, a lot of people are doing this. They're not that cost sensitive, even though Lambda can be more expensive than what you can get out of EC2 instance in a lot of circumstances. So 2017, what's next for us? I think that this is what it's looking like. We have growing use cases, right? Amazon is introducing tons of new ways to use Lambda functions. All the other providers are hooking up their functions as a service options to all types of cool use cases. Plus, we have serverless teams in organizations trying to operationalize this technology, spread it throughout their organization, get everyone doing everything in a serverless fashion as much as possible. And then we have this idea of serverless first that is spreading, right? And then the standard tooling, this goes back onto the operationalized theme. So people are standardizing around what they use. And what we get, I think, the big trend that we're starting to see is just more functions than we previously anticipated. And this is a new problem that new tools will have to be built to solve, which is like, hey, we've provisioned tons of stuff. We can't even remember what we provisioned anymore. We want to share it with our organizations. They have no idea. They need to be able to find it. People want to provision functions and share them internally throughout their organization so everyone can call the transactional email service, the notification service, auth, all that. And the other big thing that we think that we're going to see more of in 2017 is that serverless functions is a story of functions. Serverless is a story of functions, but as well as events. And as of right now, the events option has been pretty limited, but we see more and more organizations thinking about this. And that is moving away from a data-first world to an events-first world, and that is the first priority. Nordstrom, again, Rob, Eric over there, talk to them about this. Those guys have a dream of kind of re-architecting Nordstrom around this concept. And we see a lot of this behavior. We see the companies trying to build event gateways inside their organization to standardize communication. They just want to be able to drop any custom event in there, business event, any application state change, and react to it with serverless functions. And have everyone on every team writing functions to react to these events, lowering the barriers between what it takes to actually innovate new features and try new things. So this is an exciting trend for us. And lastly, we're working on a platform for all these things. The platform is all about building serverless architectures in a standard way, operating them via a nice management portal. Reusing functions, this is a big trend we think is coming more and more. Being able to share functions throughout your organization and reacting to them with any custom event. So if you're interested in checking it out, we're going to introduce this later this year. Go to serverless.com, sign up for the beta. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Austen.